Hi.
Hello there. We're on page 697, the afterword of In Search of Christian Freedom by Ray Franz. He's just brought up a scripture from Hebrews 13, 11 to 14. The New Revised Standard Version says, "Therefore Jesus also suffered outside the city gate in order to sanctify the people with his own blood. Let us then go to him outside the camp and bear the abuse he endured. For here we have no lasting city, but we are looking for the city that is to come." To which Ray comments, what does it mean for us to go to him outside the camp? Outside the camp is here used as interchangeable with outside the city. The first mention of a city in Scripture is with regard to Cain, who revealed his lack of confidence in God's declaration that Cain's life was not to be taken by other humans. The city thus becomes representative of the quest for security by one's own means. That same spirit soon surfaced in the post-flood period, and the urge to build a city synthesized the desire for security by human means, along with the desire for the power and prominence the city offered. The opposite viewpoint is presented as evidence of the faith of men like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they did not seek the protection of cities, but lived in tents because of looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. That's Hebrews 11, verses 8 to 16. All this gives deeper meaning to the Christian writer's words that here we have no lasting city, but we are looking for the city that is to come, a city described elsewhere as heavenly, the Jerusalem above, the city of the living God, according to Hebrews 12 and Galatians 4.
Well, not merely its great cities, but the world as a whole is symbolic of the human quest for security, power, and prominence. The context of the words in the letter to the Hebrews would seem to place the focus on a more specific area, the religious one. Jesus was impaled outside the city gate, and the city was Jerusalem, then the center of worship of God, a worship that under the Old Covenant could be called organized worship. Today, worship by God's servants is not, or at least should not be, centered on any one city of this world. Many may rightly claim that they are free from looking to any literal city to give them a religious sense of security or a source of power and prominence. But since we do not go to him, Christ, by going outside a literal gate or outside a literal camp, the test is not as to our showing a willingness to look elsewhere than to a literal city for our security. Many of those to whom the letter to the Hebrews was addressed were not living in Jerusalem, and we, like them, are called to go outside a figurative camp. Today we find a large religious establishment that has developed, composed of many denominations. In themselves they form many individual camps, and yet they compositely form a very large camp, constituting a city-like corporate religious establishment. This is seen in that one generally gains recognition as part of that establishment by membership in one of the denominations composing it. Not to be part of that camp in one or more of its sectors often means being viewed as an outsider, no matter how strong one's faith or how great one's devotion is to God, or how intensely one strives to hold to unity with his Son. Who goes first?
You can go first.
Well, in my paragraph, I don't know, listen to this. Constituting a city-like corporate religious establishment. And, the references to me to camp and city and then applying them to church and denominations, he might as well have just been writing another Watchtower article. To me, it sounds too much like the Watchtower. which just takes things and makes them mean what you want them to mean. So he's talking here, I would say, about Babylon the Great without saying Babylon the Great. But he might as well have said it, because that's the way it sounds. It sounds like he's dissing Christendom, but without mentioning it. Which is odd, because in other places he seems to say differently. He seems to sound different.
He's not judgmental, I would say, towards people who would choose otherwise. After all, he said at the beginning
Yeah.
of this, afterward, these are my own thoughts. But the advocacy for being outside, as he said in the last segment, siding with Charles Davis in this concept of disaffiliation from the institutions, as if you are kind of contaminated by touching the, what, unclean thing?
But then he admits he's not perfect either, so...
But the structures, the nervousness about structure is what strikes me over and over again. And again, we have to think that this is the way Ray thought till the end of his life.
So, even this thing about outside the camp, you have to, why would Jesus then, during his lifetime, been doing things connected with the temple and with the synagogues? It was his habit, it said, to go to the synagogues regularly.
And the reason he was arrested is because right to the end of his life he went to the temple when that opportunity presented itself. And therefore, the being outside the camp, the reference in Hebrews is to his crucifixion.
Yeah.
As a criminal, he was thrown out.
Yeah, he
And
didn't
that's a big
choose
difference.
He didn't choose it. He was taken out for crucifixion.
Yeah.
So that kind of suffering happened to the apostles as well. But you also find they didn't abandon the temple and the synagogues either after the death of Christ.
When they were arrested, it was because they were at the temple.
Yeah.
And in Paul's case later, the last visit to Jerusalem, he went to the temple and was arrested there. So the choice as to the distancing between you and the institution shouldn't be yours. It should be theirs. I think that's the point we have to completely disagree with here. The choice to stay outside the institutions is, for me, disobeying what Christ himself said in Revelation 2 and 3, where the command you take away from Revelation is, get out of her, my people. But that's about Babylon the Great. It's not about the church. Whereas in the chapters that are explicitly about the church, the first 3 chapters, you have commands like strengthen the things that remain.
Yeah, never a command to get out. Even in the churches with bad reports, they're told to strengthen what remains.
So we wanted to link on your screen that segment of the Book of Revelation analysis that we did based on John Stott's title, which was, What Does Christ Think of the Church? And is the command, therefore, to Christians, get out of her? Or is the command going to be strengthen the things that remain? And connected to that, we made another video on, I think it's from Ray himself.
It is a Ray, and earlier in the book, that's what somewhat confuses me. So that one was called Are XJW Still Slaves? To J.W. Org's Dates and Babylon Interpretation.
Because those two thoughts go together.
Yeah, I do think that Ray is still believing to a certain degree that they are Babylon the Great.
So those two connections to those two videos are on your screen. And Ray goes on discussing the book of Hebrews and its relevance. So we should consult, while we're thinking about this, what he prior said about the book of Hebrews and the ministers or scholars that he consulted in drawing some of his conclusions. That's next time.